IVM.
Hello and welcome to Simplified. This week we have another shortie. And this week also we do not have Shriketh. So yeah, this would I guess possibly be 4 weeks running without him. So all of his fans who are missing him, please drop him a note on Twitter telling him how much they have missed him. Yeah, we'll give you a second to do that. Well done. Okay. Use hashtag we miss you Shriketh. Moving on to what we have to simplify for you this week. So, Naren, this week I want to talk about something interesting that I read recently, something called Daisy. Okay, no, this is not the flower, not the many actresses, not even Thomas the Steam Engine's female buddy, not Donald Duck's girlfriend, not the sour cream and cottage cheese brand from the UK, and definitely not the video game. That's Daisy. So it's Daisy, D-A-I-S-Y, which is the name of a robot made by that small company that you might have heard of, Apple. What Daisy does is it takes iPhones and basically rips them apart to recycle them to use the parts in future iPhones.
Wow.
So it's like the reverse of what Foxconn does, which is assembling everything together. This systematically disassembles everything. It's basically a giant-ass recycling robot. And this is important for a number of reasons we will get into. Apple has always been a very secretive company. Yeah. Right? Like
to say the least.
To say the least, right?
Yeah.
You don't know what Apple's next product is, whether they're going to acquire somebody, what goes into the screen, why did Steve Jobs have only one t-shirt? All these questions we really don't know the answers to. And many points of time while speculations abound, it only happens when somebody says it on stage that we find out what the new products are. And that's a legacy that Apple has of secrecy. So this is very important because this is a recycling center that they're actually opening up. And they're actually welcoming other people from other companies even to come and have a look at it. So it's a manufacturing unit that is sort of like being, I wouldn't say open up to the public, but they're opening up their technology and stuff, which is something that Apple typically never does. Apple doesn't do anything that's open source in that sense, right? The second reason why this is important is just the fact that there's e-waste. There's so much e-waste that's going around the world these days. There was close to 50 million tons that was generated in 2018 globally. Just to give you a sense of that, there is 8 million tons of plastic that's going into oceans every year. So well done humanity yet again. The third reason why this is significant is because this is big PR for Apple actually. So Apple, I don't think they're going to make too much money out of this. I don't think that by means of recycling stuff from old iPhones and new iPhones, they're going to save a whole lot of money and improve their margins and all that. Because there's a whole bunch of challenges along the way. What this does do is it gives them incredible PR, right? You're suddenly saying, oh wow, Apple's at the forefront of all this of recycling and all, and they have to their credit, they have been a company that's always tried to push the envelope with respect to going green. A few years back, they actually announced that they were running on 100% renewable energy, which is a huge achievement, really, at the scale at which it operates, and being sort of like the lodestar for the tech world. Everybody else sort of like aspires to do that, right? So I think that was pretty significant. So let's talk about Daisy a little bit. So in this shortie, we're just going to talk about what it does, why, and things like that. It's actually not a new technology. They already had a robot called Liam before, Liam. And there's a beautiful video that Apple themselves have created on Liam. So Daisy is located in a secret material recovery lab in Austin, in Texas. And it's able, so here's a lovely thing. It's actually able to disassemble 9 different versions of the iPhones and go through 200 iPhones per hour.
And autonomously. So here's where it uses artificial intelligence. It actually uses scanners to figure out which iPhone it is. And on top of that, it uses other scanners to see how badly screwed is this phone. Because if a phone is coming back, chances are that it's damaged in some way or something, right? So it can determine the model. It can determine the extent to which damage has happened, if at all there is damage, because some people just want to recycle their phones because, without any damage. If it is above a certain bend degree, then it will get rejected. It's called it can't be recycled. And once it determines the bend, so all the parts, right, that take apart all the screws, they calibrate. So, depending on the bend, it will move just just a millimeter or whatever. And it rips apart the iPhone just like that, right? It takes apart all the components. It
200 phones an hour, you said.
200 iPhones an hour, yeah. It's actually pretty awesome, given that these are iPhones of different generations, right? Different sizes, and each of them will be, each of them will have their own unique damage that's happened to them. Maybe one screen can be is cracked, something else chipped off and things like that. So that's pretty useful. They use a lot of artificial intelligence to do this. So here's what it actually does. Daisy pulls out the iPhone's battery and the other smaller parts. It recycles the aluminum shell. And the reason for doing this is that it wants to extract some of the materials that can be used again. A good example of this is cobalt. Cobalt is used in the battery. It's very recyclable and is also extremely dangerous to mine. So Apple has mined a certain amount of cobalt, and it is very keen on not having to do that again, because it's poses a lot of environmental and human risk to mine cobalt. So they want to sort of recycle that again. There are lots of other small parts as well, like there's gold and silver in certain parts of the PCB, which can also be recycled. So the whole attempt at building this is to actually find a better way to recycle the materials, to salvage whatever material can be used. And this also goes for all the screws and other components like that, like the SIM holder and things like that. So Daisy is sort of like a huge robot with about 3 to 4 staff, and it's actually much smaller than the previous robot. On one end, what happens is old iPhones from a huge bin go into a funnel and they get segregated. Daisy determines the model number, degree of damage, and if it's too much bend, it gets rejected. And I have a picture of Daisy over here, and Naren, you haven't seen this before, so I'd just like you to describe this because you have lab experience and things.
It looks like one of those flexible manufacturing cells. That whole thing is Daisy.
Yep.
I mean Daisy.
Yep.
Oh, wow. It actually, you know what, it looks like stalls in an exhibition.
Wonderful. Yeah, fair point. Actually, it does look like that. Okay. So what happens? So there are some components which there is still no known way of recycling, like the display and the earpiece. So you can't recycle the display, unfortunately, especially if it's cracked. There's no way to salvage that. The earpiece, the battery is the major component that they're trying to salvage, and they blast it out with air because it's glued in. They sort of blast it with air, they freeze it, and then they take it out and then they unfreeze it. Screws from the PCB comes out, and all the various components fall into a conveyor belt where it's further sorted out. And you have other workers who disassemble the speakers, the camera. So a lot of rare earths that can be recycled.
So there is little magnets inside the speakers which are made out of rare earth. Yeah.
So now here's the thing. So I've spoken about Daisy and all that. Now here's why it's significant right now, apart from whatever I spoke about. Recycling till you might be wondering, why is this such a huge thing? Is Apple just making a huge electronics recycling's been around for a long time? Maybe it's just Apple putting the Apple spin on this. So here's the thing. Most of the electronics recycling that happened till now has been in the form of shredding. It's sort of like the electronic version of paper shredding. And that worked for a while, till about the 1970s or 80s, when all electronics had only a few materials that went behind it.
Correct.
Like a TV in the 1970s wouldn't have that many elements, raw elements. But in the words of Forbes magazine, today a product could use 3/4 of the periodic table, which is funny at once, but then you need all those elements to make, put all that technology
in different quantities.
You need, like they say, right, like the phone that you have in your pocket is more powerful than the rocket that took Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin to the moon. And the reason is because you're using these elements to make things smaller and smaller.
And some of them are also poisonous.
Some of them are poisonous to mine. Some of them are poisonous if exposed and consumed. So like the Apple iPhones could include rare earth magnets, alloys, tantalum capacitors, titanium screws, various high-end grades of aluminum, semiconductors, bonded glass displays, and all that. So this is what Daisy does. There are a few challenges. The biggest challenge being getting these phones to the center, because most people, when they use their phones, chances are they'll just dispose of them in the trash, or they will put them to normal recycling. That's what you or I would do, I would like to think, right? We wouldn't
throw especially it. True in America. Here in India, at least, there'll be a well-established, there'll be a well-established chain, because
because
but in first world countries, they won't be. They just throw it in the trash.
Correct. They throw it in the trash. And the additional challenge over here, it needs to go back to an Apple recycling center. So you can't just give it to your, the equivalent of a Raddiwala. It needs to find its way back into an Apple center, who will then ship it to this particular facility. So that is a challenge. So Apple's trying to find out a way to work around this. And I think this is philosophy that eventually we will not own products, we will own a subscription from the company. So you take a 10-year subscription or something from Apple, and you don't technically own any of the phones, but you just keep getting upgrades on existing phones as long as it goes back in the same chain. So they have you for a longer period of time. You also get a cheaper overall experience, and all that. There is criticism for even what Daisy is doing, coming from those. One of the major criticisms come from those rainers on parade in chief, Greenpeace, who say that Apple, instead of finding recycling, instead of investing in recycling, should find ways of making existing phones just last longer. But that goes against economics. We can't have all that. The surprising part of all this is that Apple is actually taking the curtains off this whole thing and actually inviting academics and even recyclers from other companies to come and have a look at the facility, so that they learn more about e-waste and all that. So to be fair to Apple, they have always, to them, going green and all that has never sounded like an afterthought. It's always been something that they've
part of their part of what they do.
They've diligently driven towards that. But it's easy for them to do because they do have that much amount of cash sitting around. And I also like to think that their audience likes them for that, right? Like if a budget phone carrier, like I don't know, like a bad example to take right now, Huawei, but whoever it is, like a Xiaomi or something, they are trying to squeeze margins as low as possible, and they probably wouldn't have time or the money to invest in something, and neither would their audience really care. Correct. I think their audience would be happy to do recycling the old way if it meant getting the phone for $50 cheaper, because unfortunately that's the way that audience is. I think the iPhone being a premium audience, they would actually...
But Apple customers have the luxury of thinking about
exactly.
These things. Yeah.
So, I mean, kudos to them for that. And the plan is to let other companies retrofit this robot technology onto their own machines so that they can automate and streamline their own recycling process, which I think is pretty noble. Yes. So that's it about Daisy, which was an upgrade on Liam, which is sort of like, think of it as a reverse time lapse of an iPhone being made. Yes. So, Naren, how do you want to end this?
Stay cool. Stay recycle, stay simplified.
Yeah. We will, all of us will be recycled.
On that pleasant note, see you next time.
Bye.
Hi, I'm Ronnie Screwella, first-generation entrepreneur and co-founder at Upgrad. My podcast, Dreaming with Your Eyes Open, is a companion podcast to my best-selling book, Dream with Your Eyes Open. On this podcast, I talked to Amit Doshi, founder of IVM Podcast, about my entrepreneurial journey. I walk you through my successes and failures, mostly my failures, and the lessons that I learned from my experiences, family, and colleagues. What was my first entrepreneurial venture? Why I chose Japanese cartoons over animation cartoons on Hungama? Why did I sell my stake at UTV to Disney? Find out all this and more on the Ronnie Screwella Podcast, Dreaming with Your Eyes Open. New episodes out every Tuesday on the IVM Podcasts app, website, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Advertising is dead. Yep, you heard me right. Advertising is dead. We're all in the content business now. Let's not call it news, TV, radio, etc., etc. It's all content, and we're in the middle of this weirdly exciting phase where all the borders and lines that have been drawn over decades has been swept away by this lovely thing called the internet. We're a show where we don't dwell on just the stuff that is now, but rather the wider stuff about advertising, media, content, and the whole goddamn circus surrounding it. Tune in every Tuesday for our weekly unboxing of the mystery box we used to call advertising. I'm Varun Dugirala, co-founder and content chief at The Glitch, and this is my new podcast, Advertising is Dead.